April Cordero, and I have a PhD in math and science education, but really the focus is in biology education.
My name is Dr. Jen Leinbach. I've been at Point Loma for 12 years. And my area of expertise, if I had to put it, is in science education, math education, as well as science education. So my master's degree is in zoology, but my specialization was freshwater ecology, biogeochemistry. And then following that, I decided to not continue and get my PhD. I taught high school biology for 10 years. And then following 10 years at the high school level, I went back and got my PhD in math and science education. And that was at a joint program at UCSD and SDSU here in San Diego.
Hi, my name is Diane Anderson. I'm a faculty member here in the biology department at Point Loma Nazarene University. I have 2 graduate degrees. I completed a master's degree in microbiology at San Diego State. And then I started teaching full-time at a community college for a few years. And then I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school. So I started a program, Math and Science Education, joint program through UC San Diego and San Diego State. And I completed that in 2003, and then I started here at Point Loma in 2005.
The wonderful, great thing about getting a degree like mine in math and science education is that it actually opens a lot of doors in that you could work at a community college level kind of program and go in to work and either teach a science or technically a math with my degree, or you could go into a 4-year collegiate program such as Point Loma, and with my degree, you could work in either a biology department or a science department or school, or you could work in an education school as well. Like you can really work both sides of that equation, and I have the brilliant opportunity to do that. So I am a joint professor in the biology department, but also in the School of Education. So I literally teach biology majors genetics, but I also get a chance to teach pre-service elementary school teachers how to teach math. So I really do walk both sides of that equation, which I love because it really allows me to share my passion in both realms, the science realm as well as the education realm.
So there are 2 kinds of education degrees you can get. One is through an education department, and then you would work for an education department when you graduate. And another is through a natural sciences department like biology, where then the expectation is that you would work in a biology department, but you would have expertise in instruction, curriculum and instruction. It's different, as I understand it, from getting a PhD in the let's say microbiome or environmental science or ecology, in that you could just cold apply.
I think it's different from a degree in biology, PhD in biology, because obviously the biggest difference is there's no lab work. So my research was based on interviewing students, creating diagnostic assessments and using them in a classroom, and then interviewing students to explain really the quantitative data. I fell in love with that kind of research. It was the hardest research I'd ever done, but by far the most rewarding for me.
So my dissertation focused on one teacher over 3 years, and how she was doing specific things with her 5th graders over that 3-year pan. Now, that means I wasn't in the classroom every day for 3 entire years. No. But for about 3 weeks, all 3 years, I was actually video recording her with her students and analyzing what she was doing and why she was doing it in the classroom, and then drawing conclusions about the implications of what she was doing and how she was doing it. So my research really involved being in the classroom with the teacher, with the students, video recording and analyzing video recording. Very different than bench science.
I got my bachelor's degree. I worked in a lab, a biology lab, for, about 1.5 years. And I really decided I did not like lab work. I was synthesizing peptides and decided I wanted to be a teacher. Went back and got a teaching credential and master's degree and taught high school for almost a decade. And then I got hired at UC San Diego as an instructor and realized I'm going to want that job or that job or that job, and they all required a PhD. So I went back to school again. My desire was to always teach. So once I was a high school teacher, I knew I wanted to teach. I just wanted to teach at the college level. And I wanted to be a good teacher. And I saw that all the instruction I'd had up to that point from biology professors was lecture. They just stood there and talked at me for an hour. I wrote as fast as I could in my chemistry, in my physics, in my biology. And when I went to my teacher education program and learned how to be a teacher, I realized how people learn. And it's super interesting, the science behind how people learn and the best ways to design classroom instruction to promote learning. And so I thought, okay, I really want to be a biology professor teaching biology, but I want to do it really well, and I don't want to have to do bench science research.
First of all, after my master's degree experience, I knew I didn't want to be in the lab. I didn't enjoy that work at all. I thought perhaps I just didn't like research, but it turns out I just didn't like that kind of research. Once I started teaching full time, I knew there were gaps in what my students were learning and what I thought I was teaching, and that kind of created some real questions for me about something's not matching up here. So I decided to pursue a degree in a PhD in education, science education, because PhD is all about a degree in asking a question, collecting the data, analyzing it, and not just describing the findings, but really digging deeper into why that's the case.
I loved the sciences. I knew I wanted to go into science, and that's why I pursued undergraduate and master's degree levels in science. But I also loved teaching, and I didn't even realize that until I got into my upper division undergraduate and then in my master's program, because I was a TA. I was in the lab TAing, and I found that was really where my passion was. And so following my master's degree in biology, I went in to teach at the high school level for 10 years, a decade. And I loved teaching, but I decided that I did want to go on and get my PhD, but not in a bench science or a field science, which is where I had been, but I wanted to go into the realm of science education. So I loved science, I loved teaching and learning, and I wanted to put the two together. And so I decided to pursue a PhD, a doctoral program specifically in math and science education, it turned out.
We're going to have cures for diseases, other issues, in solving environmental problems. The better teaching we can have, the better students we're graduating, the more we can move the field forward. So that's why you'd want to get a PhD in science education.
If you are interested in biology, but also really interested in thinking about teaching at a deep level, the PhD in math and science education would be a great choice.
So a student that would like a PhD in, let's say, biology education or science education would be somebody that maybe has decided, all right, bench science or field research isn't really how I want to spend and focus a big majority of my time. I might do a little on the side here or there, but that's just not my thing. And I don't really want to start up a research program at a university and then teach students how to do that kind of research, because that's just not my thing. So, but I love the field and I love teaching. So what can I do? And so that it would be really appropriate for that kind of student and a student who loves biology.
So at Point Loma, we offer lots of opportunities for students to work in labs. I think that's the best way for you to tell, do you like to work with students in a classroom setting? Do you like to be able to kind of coach them as they're learning something? Do you like to grade things? One of the great conversations I like to have with students considering grad school is that many grad school programs do not require you to pay a dime. So I earned my master's degree at San Diego State. They paid my tuition, fees, books, and I also got a stipend for teaching classes while I was there. Same thing for my PhD. I had funding through San Diego State, so I did research with various projects. I never did any teaching assistant work through that program, but my whole program was paid for, got a living stipend, and graduated with no debt.
So a lot of times you don't have an opportunity to have a full-time job during a PhD program. So you could either take out student loans, of which I did take a student loan out, or you could also have a research assistantship or a fellowship or a teaching assistantship. In my PhD program, I was a teaching assistant for part of the time, and I was a research assistant for part of the time as well. And so it was not extremely lucrative. However, it definitely paid for tuition, so I did not have to pay for tuition at all. And I did get a small stipend, and that allowed me to take out smaller loans.
So I would say if you do one of these programs through a natural sciences department, like I did, there's money and funding, just like it is for the physics, chemistry, and biology PhD students. So I did not pay a dime, and they paid me a living stipend. So just like all the other science students, I was considered one of the other science students, and treated the same way. And for me, I did TA work, which paid. So for the program I was in, the expectation was that you would work 20 hours a week, and the rest was school. And that was loose 20 hours. So they would consider you TAing one course as sufficient to cover your stipend. So I always TA'd upper division ecology courses. I was an ecology focus, ecology and evolution focus. So I was always TAing those kind of courses, leading review sessions, grading finals, and doing that kind of work for both lower division and upper division ecology and evolution courses. That paid for me several of my years. For 2 of the years, I was on a grant. So my 20 hours of work was to be doing research that was part of a physics education grant. So a physicist had gotten this giant, large NSF grant. And so I was paid through that, and they paid my tuition through that. My last year, which was my 5th year, I had a fellowship. UCSD had offered a fellowship, so I didn't have to do work, which was wonderful because it really just allowed me to write. So the process to get into one of these programs, there are several across the nation. There's some great ones at other universities other than the one I went to. And my first step would be to Google it. I just Google PhD in science education, PhD in biology education. So maybe you might be interested in chemistry ed. There are some foci on the programs that focus on that. I always say go on the website, find a program, and then start looking at the instructors and click on their pages on Google and find out what their research is and figure out what you find interesting, what's not interesting, what kind of questions do you have. If possible, and I've always told the students I advise this, email them and say, hey, I'm interested in your PhD program in blah, blah, blah. Would you be willing to have a 15 or 20-minute Zoom conversation with me? And I always have a set of questions. I see you did research in this, or I see you publish a paper on that, and you can skim their abstract, those kinds of things. Prepare yourself to engage in a conversation. If the faculty members, which is usually the case, get to have a say in who's accepted into the program, they'll be like, oh, that lady April, she interviewed me and she seemed to know about my research and had a neat personality or whatever. So let's accept that person. You know, when it's all equal, all the applications are equal. If you can have a leg up because somebody recognizes you, your name, something you said, a great question you asked, if you show that you're interested, if you show that you've read something about the research, you just get that little bump, and it certainly cannot hurt. One of the things that I would recommend is that you look at the authors of papers and see if there's multiple authors and if some are student authors. Sometimes you can see that at the end in the acknowledgments or the discussion of that. What you want to do is you want to choose a program, and sometimes you have to say what you're interested in within that program, who you'd like to work with, that they are publishing, they're doing research in an area that interests you, and they involve their students in that. So when you're trying to choose a program, you could choose to go to Harvard. That doesn't necessarily mean because it's Harvard, it's the best program. So it's really important, in my opinion, that you talk with other students in the program to find out what they're doing and what opportunities you're going to have to work on projects, the professor's projects, your own projects, what kind of autonomy will you have. So that's the first thing I would look for, is a program where you're going to have a great experience doing something that you would enjoy doing. The second thing I would look for is funding. How much of your tuition might you have to pay? How much are they going to subsidize you? If they're getting those grants, then they can fund you, which means they're doing great research. So there's sort of this signal back and forth that this is a good program. So what's your experience going to be like? Are you going to be funded? That's going to tell you the quality and the rigor of the program. And then are people finishing in 5 or 6 years? That's another huge. What's their ABD, all but dissertation rate? How many people are getting there but can't seem to finish? Because then it shows you how much the program mentors you through to help you finish.
So there's a lot in that question. And so there are a couple of things you want to think of. First of all, do you want a full-time doctoral program, graduate program, where you would not necessarily be working a full-time job, you would be going to school full-time. So that's one thing to consider. Or do you want a part-time position where you would instead be working part-time or full-time and then taking classes maybe 1 or 2 at a time? So that's one thing to consider. And obviously finances really do play a portion of that decision-making. Also location. So are you tied to a particular geographical location, or are you open to looking countrywide or even worldwide for your particular doctoral program? Are you looking for me, am I looking for just science education? And the answer was yes. I wanted to find a program that was specific to science education, not just educational leadership or not just, curriculum and instruction. And there are doctoral programs in those areas, but I wanted to focus and narrow into science education, which narrowed the field, but gave me very specific school programs to look at. I found 3 or 4. And then once you decide, okay, that might be of something of interest because it has the area of interest, it's in a geographical location you'd be interested in, it's full-time or part-time, then what kinds of research projects are they actually doing at that particular place? Are they researching particular phenomena or content or areas that are of interest to me? That's another factor. There are some places that may be researching something really exciting, but I have no interest in. I don't really want to go there. Also, if you start to explore and kind of reach out to faculty members in those programs, are they open to taking new students? Is there room in their research group to be able to take new doctoral students? And so a lot of times that takes a little bit of nerve and gumption to reach out, send an email, say a little bit about who you are and what you're interested in, and is there possible opportunities for you in that particular research group. And I did that when I was going through my PhD program. I reached out to 3 or 4, I think, different schools, made some initial contacts. With my PhD program, they did rotations. So I got accepted into the program and I had an idea of who I might want to work with, but I got into a rotation. And from that rotation, then I ultimately kind of gravitated towards a particular researcher who was involved in a larger project. And that's where my dissertation came from.
In my case, and in all science education PhD programs that I know, you have to have a master's degree in a science area before you can even apply. They want to know that you have a really solid base in some area of science before you get into the PhD program. Applying to and choosing a PhD program is a little different approach than you would in a PhD in biology. First of all, there are many fewer programs, so your options are going to be more limited. I happen to be thrilled that there was one here in San Diego, so I didn't have to relocate. There are some amazing programs that are more competitive, some that are less competitive, and more programs are starting to pop up. I did talk to 2 professors before I got accepted in the program, and that helped. I've told many students applying to graduate school, finding an advisor is probably the top priority. And you can find that information by contacting their graduate students, perhaps, reading about what they do, talking with them, because there are some advisors out there that are doing really interesting stuff, but they're horrible to work with. Whatever you can do to kind of snoop around and do some detective work is going to benefit you in the long run, for sure. My suggestion for anybody who's interested in possibly pursuing the path that I have carved out for myself is, first of all, if you know you love biology and you know that you love people, try to get teaching experience in some way.
So not only can you be great in your classroom, but then you can work with other professors to help them improve when they're ready, what they want to. You become a model for how instruction can be done, so that people are doing the best learning they can achieve. And if that's the case, biology is going to move forward in the fastest way possible.
I wish I had this because Applying for my master's program was awful. I applied to 7 schools. I got into 1, which was my alma mater. Like I got into the one I was currently at, which I'm grateful for. And it was great for me to do that. But I didn't know what in the world I was doing. And so it wasn't when I went around 10 years later and applied to doctoral programs, I had a lot more gravitas. Like I knew what I was looking for, and I knew that, and I felt confident to go out and get it. But like as a undergrad, looking at my master's or my initial, I had no idea what I was looking for. I didn't know how to do it. So this would have been really helpful.